Okay, buddy, this is the next video on the phonology of Dutch. If you don't know what phonology is, think of it as phonetics. Okay, I'm just going to simplify this. I'm not going to explain the difference between the two. It's just phonetics applied to a specific language. We want to call it that to be simple. So the next thing I did was after setting the goals, and actually I already started this the day before. That's what allowed me to begin the journey for a week. Was that I mentioned in the intro video that I would listen to. I had three kind of sets of days in which I didn't know at the beginning how many days it would be, but the first I just listened to a kind of a meeting for a nonprofit association in the morning and in the evening. It was probably 2 hours, an hour and a half to 2 hours of listening time both times, so about 3 hours of time. And uh, and I knew I was there. I said hello and stuff. That's all in Dutch, but they knew I didn't know Dutch, and I said I was going to learn Dutch, so that was enough. I was invited by my language instructor. So the what I did the first time, and then what I improved on a little bit later, suffer the noise fitting in a restaurant, so we get a little bit of extra noise with the kids and stuff, but that's okay. It's better here than doing this in a car, right? While I'm driving. So I decided not to do that and get myself in a crash, right? So this is better. Um, and so what I did was I just listened. Just listened. And I'm used to this. I can handle this. I'm used to listening to languages that I don't know for a long time to try to figure it out. And that's field work linguists, but we're trained to do this, and I've trained people to do this. You've got to be very persistent, and it takes long. And you have to be able to handle not understanding. Just accept that, right? And you'll figure it out. So what I listened, and I don't have it here. It's actually somewhere in my car, um, but I just listened to the whole thing for those 2 sessions that day, and then I created a graph. And these linguists, you create this phonology matrix, okay? And you do one for the vowels and you do one for the consonants. The consonants are all the hard sounds, and all the vowels are all the vowel sounds, right? The open sounds, all consonants, okay, that kind of stuff. And the vowels are basic ones are a, e, o, u. Okay, and then you got a lot of variations of those. Just be simple here. And so what I did was I created the consonant chart, and I created the vowel chart. And I'll say that the vowel chart for Dutch is very complex, okay, because there are a lot of vowels. It's a very vowel-heavy language. In fact, I'll call it a very vocalic language because all the consonants kind of have a lot of vowel type of traits, okay? And I'm not saying they're vowels, but they have vowel type traits, and they go well with vowels because there are a lot of vowels. So it's this thing, the kind of symbiosis between the consonants and the vowels, of course. But as I drew the chart from my hearing, and then I used that to be able to figure out what the sounds were in the writing system later, after I figure out how to write it, right? After I read it to recognize the writing. But I figured out what the vowel sounds first to get the chart. And we linguists and phoneticians, we have a chart that we follow, right? And I did check this actually several days later after I'd done through another session of the listening again for an intense amount of a few hours that day. And then I checked later in the week. I started like on a Sunday, if I remember. And then somehow about Thursday of the week, I looked up the book called Dutch Phonology that is published by Oxford University Press. And I looked specifically down to the vowel chart and the consonant chart, right? And my vowel chart was really close. It was quite close. And the consonant chart was close. And I think I had maybe an extra consonant just because I was considering out of the words that could come from borrowed words from other languages, right? So, I mean, that's no big deal. But it was pretty close. It followed the frame that were there, and all the vowels I had identified the long vowel, short vowels, and all that kind of stuff in it. I just used a different way of noting it from phonetics, but that's okay. I mean, it's both ways are possible. So it was pretty close, which was important to start with. So I haven't lost my ear for doing this. And I have my transcription because you got to write in phonetic alphabet, right? It's called the International Phonetic Alphabet to do this for each sound. So that was kind of the first step, and I used that for the whole week to figure out, I was constantly writing, constantly and comparing things. I'm going to talk about the next one about how we did another approach to this, but this was very important to. In fact, no, I'll mention it here because we're on the phonology language. So then, what I did is in linguistics called what's called minimal pairs. And this is not done by language teachers. This is done by a linguist, usually to figure out what the sounds are. Because a language teacher knows what the language is, right? And those teaches it. A linguist has to figure out a language they don't know, right? It's not just a regular language learner. This person figured out usually a non-written language or something. So there's no writing system, right? So you have to figure it out for the sounds only. And sometimes the people don't have a way to communicate in another language with you. Sometimes they do. So you might have to just be in a completely isolated situation, figure out from only hearing and listening, hearing and listening for a long time. So the thing here is what minimal pairs are. You go through and you hear the vowel sounds usually, and then you hear if there's a consonant at the beginning and a consonant at the end of these segments of words, and what you think might be words, right? Sometimes you can hear where the words are, right? You can hear where there's spaces between the words. It's possible to do this in a kind of a phrase, right? Then what you do is you try to identify what called minimal pairs is. I don't want to give examples. I'm not usually thinking about how to do this in English, right? Because I'm used to doing this in other languages. But you'll probably you'll think of examples like you'll have it so that nothing changes in that word, that short little form, with a vowel and maybe an end of a word consonant and the beginning of the word. Only one thing changes all the time. So you might go bore, more, bore, poor, core, door, vor, for. Okay, so all the things the only thing that changes is the initial consonant, right? So you do that, and you usually start with in phonology, you start with the b and the p and the m because a lot's with your lips, right? And then you do the t, the d with your tongue goes against your teeth, and then you do the f and the v because your teeth are touching your lips, and then it goes back in the mouth. So all these sounds are in an ordered way in your mouth. So you do all this bore, pour, more, and then for, and then core, gore, and all that. Okay, I'm just kind of giving an example of how these words don't necessarily exist, but this is how you do it. And you figure out if these are words or not, and you try to figure out with the person, is this a word or not, or is this sound, is this possible, or is it not possible? This is the key. Does it affect meaning, right? Or could it be a word? That's the key. Even if it doesn't, maybe it doesn't really exist, but could it be a word that you invented, right? Would it go with the phonology and the meaning of the language, the possibility for the language, right? Could exist. So this is the first thing. And then you might do the same thing. You might change only the end of the word, like. So we said that one. We would say, I want to say something like, we said bore, poor, and all that for the or, right? And let's say we start with bove. Okay, I'm going to invent boke, moke, poke, toke, doke, coke, goke, like that. So you change. No, I've done the same thing again. I've done the same thing here. I got to think of the opposite, right? So, so I want to keep the thing at the beginning as the same. So, yeah, I did it. So both, but yeah. I've got all the both. So I put it at the beginning and keep the thing at the beginning as always the same, right? So, boke, poke, bore, bove, boof, something like that, right? So you keep the sound at the beginning all this the same, and then you keep the end sound changes, right? And is the vowels, and you do for each one of the vowels. You got to figure out all the vowels are, and then you got to do for every single vowel you want to do this. It's called minimal pairs. And what this does is help you establish what are the consonants that are acceptable in the language and used, and what are the vowels that are acceptable in the language. And you got to do this for every single one. Now, what's get really interesting for Dutch here, and I'm going to finish up with this statement, is that there are a lot of vowels. So there are a lot of these minimal pair things you got to do to figure out. And then the hard thing is that when you need to apply this to the writing system, to reading and writing, there are some inconsistency with the writing. It's that made it really fun. And in the end, all I'll say is that what I figure out, and I'll kind of give you a little preview, I'm giving you a little teaser, the spoiler for the end of the consensus. I said to her, we can get rid of the f and the because you don't need both of them. You only need one because they both are used in the same. You don't need, it doesn't really matter. And I said, we can get rid of the ha and the hey, or one of the two. And no, we can't do that. But so this is what linguists would like to do that because we don't want to simplify, because if possible simplify, we could do it right. But so this was, again, you need to be a linguist to understand this, that understands these things, the phonetics and the phonology aspects. And doing that, then you're able to kind of figure out what's possible. So that was a big advantage for me to be able to do this. It's not something that you can just start doing if you've not been trained to do it. Not at least this approach. So that was the first thing. And again, I'm learning this by just pronouncing and listening, right? Listening and pronouncing, listening and pronouncing. And I don't understand any of the words. I don't know what they mean. I don't care, right? My line instructor tried to tell me what the words were, which was good. She would tell me. I mean, she would tell me in English what they mean, right? Or show me. That helps. That helps a lot. In fact, that helps because you need to know what they are and you can bring them up again and use them, right, in sentences. But it's really important to start what is possible and what's not possible. Kind of like the example is the word smurf. And actually, in linguistics, we use the word wug. I wug the wug who wugged and wugged me because that person we wugged the wug and then was wugged. Smurf is kind of like the smurf, smurf, the smurfs, and the smurfed, and they were all smurfed, right? So this kind of word is a word you try to figure out all these words by placing it in places and figuring out what they are pronunciation wise, right? And then you figure out in the grammar or in the sentence where you can put it and use it. So that's phonology and the beginning of grammar, right? And syntax and morphology and all those fun things in linguistics. So let's get on to the next video now. But that's the phonology of Dutch.